The massive warship broke through Earth's atmosphere on a Tuesday afternoon. It was the size of a small city, casting a shadow over half of New York as it descended from the clouds. The ship was called the Eternal Dominion, and it belonged to the Galactic Empire, a civilization that had conquered 47 star systems across the galaxy. They had come to add Earth to their collection. High Commander Xilax stood on the bridge of his vessel, watching the blue planet below with his compound eyes. He was a Vorthian, a species that resembled giant insects with shiny black shells and clicking mandibles. His people had been conquering worlds for 3,000 years, and they had never failed. The process was always the same. They would arrive, deliver their ultimatum, and watch the primitive species fall to their knees in terror. Xilax pressed a button on his console and began his broadcast. Every television, radio, and phone on Earth suddenly displayed his terrifying form. His voice boomed across the planet in every language simultaneously. "People of Earth," he declared, "I am High Commander Xilax of the Galactic Empire. Your planet now belongs to us. You will surrender immediately. Resistance is pointless. Your primitive weapons cannot harm our ships. Your leaders will present themselves for processing within 1 Earth hour. Failure to comply will result in consequences you cannot imagine." He ended the transmission and sat back in his command chair, waiting for the panic to begin. On every other world, this moment was followed by screaming, chaos, and eventual surrender. He expected nothing different from these soft, fleshy humans. But something had gone wrong with the transmission. The Eternal Dominion had accidentally connected to an old Earth satellite that was still running some kind of audio processing software. By the time Xilax's message reached human ears, it had been auto-tuned into a catchy musical beat. His threatening words now sounded like a pop song, complete with rhythm and melody. At the United Nations building, world leaders had gathered for an emergency session. They watched the message on a large screen, their faces tense with worry. Then Lieutenant Commander Katie Brooks, a young officer from the United States Space Force, began to laugh. She tried to hold it in, pressing her hand against her mouth, but it was no use. The alien warlord sounded like he was performing at a music festival. Her laughter spread like a virus. Within seconds, the French ambassador was chuckling. The British Prime Minister snorted into his tea. The Russian delegate made a sound like a broken accordion. Soon, the entire assembly was roaring with laughter, tears streaming down their faces. Outside, in the streets of every city, people were not running in fear. They were dancing. Someone had already uploaded the auto-tuned message to the internet, and it was spreading faster than any video in history. A teenager in Los Angeles had created a dance to go with it. A grandmother in Tokyo was doing the moves in her living room. A group of construction workers in Cairo were performing it on their lunch break. The hashtag Surrender Dance Challenge was trending worldwide within 15 minutes. Ambassador Danny Ortega was chosen to deliver humanity's official response. He was a calm man in his 50s, known for his steady nerves and diplomatic skills. But even he was struggling to keep a straight face as he approached the camera. "Greetings, High Commander Xilax," he said, his voice only slightly shaky from suppressed laughter. "On behalf of the people of Earth, I welcome you to our planet. We have received your message, and we are very impressed by your musical talents." He paused to take a breath. Behind the camera, Katie Brooks was making gestures that were not helping his composure. "We would be happy to discuss your proposal," Danny continued. "Perhaps we could meet in person? We have many questions about your culture, your technology, and your clearly advanced entertainment industry." He ended the transmission and immediately burst into laughter, along with everyone else in the room. On the bridge of the Eternal Dominion, High Commander Xilax was experiencing an emotion he had never felt before. His tactical officer, a younger Vorthian named Drex, approached him carefully. "Commander," Drek said, "I've analyzed the human response. They do not appear to be frightened." "That is impossible," Xylax replied. "All species fear us. We are the terror of the galaxy." "Sir, they appear to be dancing, millions of them. They have turned your ultimatum into something called a meme. I am not entirely sure what that means, but it seems to be spreading rapidly through their communication networks." Xylax stared at the screens showing feeds from around the Earth. Humans were indeed dancing everywhere. Some were doing it in groups. Others were doing it alone in their homes. A few were doing it in costumes that seemed to be crude imitations of Vorthian appearance. "They are mocking us," Xylax said slowly. "It would appear so." "Commander." Xylax's mandibles clicked together in agitation. This was not supposed to happen. The Vorthians had conquered hundreds of worlds, and not once had any species laughed at them. Fear was the foundation of their empire. Without fear, what did they have? "Prepare a show of force," he ordered. "Bring the entire fleet into their atmosphere. We will remind these humans what true power looks like." "Yes, Commander." As his officers scrambled to follow orders, Xylax watched the humans continue their ridiculous dancing. He noticed that even their military personnel seemed to be participating. A group of soldiers at some kind of base were doing the dance in perfect formation, their weapons set aside. He did not understand these creatures at all. Every other species in the galaxy understood the natural order. The strong conquered the weak. The powerful intimidated the powerless. It was simple, logical, and efficient. But humans seemed to operate on entirely different rules. They saw a massive warship descending from the sky, and instead of screaming, they started dancing. They heard a threat of destruction, and they turned it into music. They faced the might of a galactic empire, and they laughed. Xylax made a decision. He would show them the full power of his fleet. 300 warships would fill their skies. Then they would understand. Then they would fear. He was absolutely certain of this. He was also absolutely wrong. The sky over the Pacific Ocean turned dark as 300 alien warships descended through the clouds. Each vessel was enormous, bristling with weapons and covered in strange symbols. They moved in perfect formation, blocking out the sun and casting shadows across the waves below. It was the largest display of military power the Galactic Empire had ever assembled for a single planet. High Commander Xylax stood proudly on the bridge of the Eternal Dominion, watching his fleet take position. This would teach the humans to laugh at him. This would remind them of their place in the universe. No species could see this sight and not feel fear in their hearts. Below the Armada, a United States Navy carrier group had been conducting routine exercises. Captain Ben Harper stood on the deck of his aircraft carrier, coffee in hand, watching the alien ships fill the sky. His crew had stopped their work to stare upward, their mouths hanging open. "Well," Ben said calmly, taking a sip of his coffee, "that is certainly something." His executive officer, Commander Lisa Cho, appeared beside him with a tablet in her hands. She was a practical woman who had served in the Navy for 20 years, and she had learned to stay calm in unusual situations. This was definitely the most unusual situation of her career. "Sir, we are receiving orders from Washington," she said. "They want us to observe, but not engage." "Makes sense," Ben replied. "Any idea what those weapons on their ships actually do?" "Intelligence is still working on that, sir. But initial analysis suggests they are some kind of energy-based system. Plasma or laser technology, most likely." Ben nodded and continued watching the sky. The alien ships were impressive in size, but something about them seemed odd to him. Their weapons looked almost decorative, like props from an old science fiction movie. The barrels were too wide, the energy cores too exposed. It was almost like looking at a child's drawing of what a space weapon should look like. On the Eternal Dominion, Xylax ordered his fleet to fire a warning shot. A beam of bright green energy lanced down from the lead warship and struck the ocean about a mile from the carrier group. The water hissed and bubbled where the beam hit, creating a large patch of warm, steaming water. Ben watched this with raised eyebrows. "That is it?" he asked. "It appears so, sir," Lisa replied, checking her instruments. "The water temperature in that area has increased by about 40 degrees. No explosive force. No radiation, just heat." As they watched, a pod of dolphins swam into the warm patch of water. The animals seemed to enjoy the warmth, jumping and playing in the heated zone. Within minutes, a marine research vessel nearby was live-streaming the dolphins, and the video was spreading across the internet. A marine biologist named Laura Simmons was on that research vessel, and she was absolutely delighted. She had been studying dolphin behavior for 15 years, and she had never seen them so happy. She spoke excitedly into her camera, explaining how the warm water was creating a perfect environment for the dolphins to play. Her video received more views than the alien invasion itself. Back in Washington, a group of Pentagon analysts were having a very strange meeting. Kevin Marsh, a weapons specialist with thick glasses and a permanent look of confusion, was presenting his findings to a room full of generals and admirals. "So let me understand this correctly," said General Patricia Cole, the highest-ranking officer in the room. "You are telling me that the most powerful military force in the galaxy uses weapons that are weaker than what we had in World War II. "That is correct, ma'am," Kevin said, clicking to his next slide. "Based on our analysis of their warning shot and the limited data we have gathered, their plasma weapons are roughly equivalent to a high-powered industrial laser. Dangerous to unprotected personnel, certainly, but their ships have no armor-piercing capability, no explosive ordnance, and no projectile weapons of any kind." The room was silent for a moment. Then someone in the back started laughing. Soon, the entire room was struggling to maintain composure. "How is this possible?" General Cole asked, wiping her eyes. "They have conquered 47 star systems. How did they do that with laser pointers?" Kevin adjusted his glasses. "We believe, ma'am, that they simply never needed real weapons. Every species they encountered surrendered immediately upon seeing their fleet. They have been running on intimidation alone for 3,000 years. They have never actually fought anyone. So, they are basically a really big bluff?" "Essentially, yes. They are the galactic equivalent of a scarecrow." General Cole leaned back in her chair, processing this information. Humanity had spent its entire history developing more and more effective ways to kill each other. Nuclear weapons, ballistic missiles, artillery, explosives, firearms. The list went on and on. It was not a proud part of human nature, but it was undeniably effective. These aliens had spent 3,000 years conquering the galaxy without ever inventing the gun. Meanwhile, back on his ship, High Commander Xylax was growing increasingly confused. His warning shot had not caused panic. Instead, his sensors showed humans gathering at beaches to watch the warm spot in the ocean. Some were bringing food and drinks. They appeared to be having what his cultural database identified as a party. "Commander," Drek said hesitantly, "the humans have given a name to the heated water zone. They are calling it the Alien Hot Tub. There are already boats heading toward it." Xylax slammed his fist on his console. "Fire again. Multiple targets. Show them our full power." The fleet opened fire, sending dozens of green beams down toward the ocean. Each one created another warm patch of water. Within an hour, the Pacific Ocean had several new popular swimming spots, and tourism companies were already advertising alien spa experiences. On social media, humans were posting pictures of themselves relaxing in the heated water, giving thumbs up to the alien warships above them. A popular comedian named Ryan DeLuca posted a video thanking the Galactic Empire for their contribution to his vacation dot in his command chair. Xylax sat in stunned silence. He had brought 300 warships to intimidate this planet. He had fired enough shots to terrify any normal species into complete submission. And the humans had responded by going swimming. What are these creatures? He whispered to himself. Drex did not have an answer. Neither did anyone else in the fleet dot as the sun set over the Pacific. Humans continued to swim and play in the warm water, completely unafraid of the massive warships hovering above them. Somewhere, a radio was playing the auto-tuned version of Xylax's original ultimatum. The Galactic Empire had made a terrible mistake. They had threatened the one species in the galaxy that found their power funny. High Commander Xylax spent 3 days trying to understand what was happening on Earth. His ships remained in the sky, an ever-present reminder of the Galactic Empire's power. But the humans below simply went about their daily lives, occasionally waving at the warships as if they were interesting clouds. Finally, Xylax made a difficult decision. He contacted his superiors and requested a diplomatic specialist. If force would not work on these strange creatures, perhaps negotiation would. The Empire had conquered many worlds through careful diplomacy, usually after frightening the local population into submission. Surely the same tactics would work here. Grand Diplomat Desara arrived on a shuttle 3 days later. She was a member of a species called the Vanathi, creatures that looked like large purple octopuses with 6 arms and enormous golden eyes. Her people were known throughout the galaxy as master negotiators, able to read emotions and manipulate conversations with incredible skill. She had personally overseen the surrender of 12 star systems. Desara studied the files on humanity during her journey. She was troubled by what she read. These creatures showed no fear responses to standard intimidation. They communicated through something called humor that the Empire's translators struggled to understand. And they had a disturbing habit of forming emotional attachments to everything, including their enemies. Still, she was confident. She had dealt with difficult species before. She would find humanity's weakness and exploit it. The diplomatic summit was held in Geneva, in a large conference center that humans used for important meetings. Desara arrived in full ceremonial robes, her 6 arms arranged in positions that were meant to project dominance and power. 2 Vorthian guards flanked her, their armor polished to a mere shine dot. She entered the conference room expecting to see cowering officials, nervous diplomats, and perhaps some military leaders trying to hide their fear. Instead, she found a smiling woman in a business suit walking toward her with an outstretched hand. "Welcome to Earth," said Congresswoman Megan Price, grabbing one of Desara's tentacles and shaking it enthusiastically. "We are so excited to meet you. Can I just say, your coloring is absolutely beautiful. That shade of purple is stunning." Desara froze. In 3,000 years of diplomatic service, no one had ever complimented her appearance. Threats, yes. Insults, occasionally. Terrified silence, most often. But never compliments. "Thank you," she managed to say. "Oh my goodness, your eyes are gorgeous too. Like liquid gold. Hey, would you mind if we took a picture together? My daughter is going to lose her mind when she sees I met a real alien." Before Desara could respond, Megan had pulled out a small device and was standing next to her, making a strange gesture with her fingers. There was a flash of light, and apparently the picture was taken. "Perfect," Megan said. "Now, let me show you to the conference room. We have snacks and drinks. Is there anything you cannot eat? We were not sure about your dietary requirements, so we prepared a variety of options." Desara allowed herself to be led down a hallway, completely off balance. Her guards followed behind, looking equally confused. They passed humans who smiled and waved at them. One young man told Desara that he loved her robes. An elderly woman asked if she needed anything. The conference room was warm and well lit. A long table was covered with food and drinks of various kinds. Ambassador Danny Ortega stood as they entered, a genuine smile on his face. "Grand Diplomat Desara," he said. "Welcome. Please, make yourself comfortable. We noticed the temperature on your ships is higher than ours, so we turned up the heat. Is it warm enough for you?" It was, in fact, perfectly comfortable. Desara had been dreading the cold that she knew most primitive planets had in their buildings. The fact that the humans had thought to adjust it for her was unexpected and unsettling. "It is acceptable," she said, trying to regain control of the situation. "Now, let us discuss the terms of your surrender." Of course, Danny said, still smiling. "But first, you must be tired from your journey. Please, sit down. Have something to eat. We have prepared a special dish that we think you might enjoy. It is called pizza." Desara did not want to eat pizza. She wanted to negotiate humanity's surrender and return to her quarters. But the humans were already guiding her to a chair, placing a warm blanket over her tentacles because the room was still a bit chilly, and putting a plate of this pizza in front of her. The smell was remarkable. Despite herself, Desara picked up a slice with one of her tentacles and took a bite. It was the most delicious thing she had ever tasted. "This is acceptable," she said, trying to hide her reaction. She failed completely. Her skin had turned a lighter shade of purple, which in her species indicated extreme pleasure. "She likes it," Megan announced happily. "I knew she would. Try the one with extra cheese next." Over the next 2 hours, Desara ate more pizza than she had ever eaten of any food in her life. The humans kept talking to her, asking questions about her home world, her favorite colors, her family. They showed her pictures of their own families, their pets, their homes. At one point, Danny presented her with a small book. It had colorful pictures and simple words. The title was How to Make Friends. "We thought you might enjoy this," he said. "It is one of our favorites. It teaches the basics of friendship and cooperation." Desara stared at the book. It was clearly meant for human children. It had pictures of small humans holding hands and sharing toys. The message was simple and innocent. She should have been offended. She was a grand diplomat of the Galactic Empire, not a child to be educated. But something about the gesture touched her in a way she did not understand. "May I keep this?" she asked quietly. "Of course," Danny said. "It is a gift." That night, Desara sent her report back to the Empire. It was short and confused. She wrote that the humans showed no signs of fear. They were friendly to the point of being disorienting. Their food was excellent, and they had given her a book about friendship. She did not know how to conquer them. She was not even sure she wanted to anymore. High Commander Xylax read the report with growing despair. His most skilled diplomat had been defeated by pizza and a children's book. He had no idea what to do next. In her quarters, Desara read her new book 3 times before going to sleep. She dreamed of making friends. The news spread through the Galactic Empire like fire through dry grass. The mighty fleet had failed to intimidate Earth. The humans were not afraid. They were laughing. On the capital world of Vorthax Prime, Emperor Vaxillion the Terrible sat upon his throne and listened to report after report of the disaster unfolding in that distant solar system. Each update was worse than the last. The humans had turned the invasion into entertainment. They had made the Supreme Commander's ultimatum into music. They had turned the warning shots into swimming pools. And now, something even more troubling was happening. Human memes were spreading through the Imperial communication networks. "What is a meme?" the Emperor demanded, his massive form shifting on his throne. He was the largest Vorthian ever born, with a shell as black as space and eyes that glowed like dying stars. He had ruled the Empire for 200 years through fear and power. His chief advisor, an elderly Vorthian named Council of Rek, pulled up images on the main display screen. They showed pictures with text on them. One had High Commander Xylax's face with the words, "I came to conquer Earth." They offered me pizza. Another showed a human giving 2 thumbs up with the caption, "Thanks for the hot tub." Alien brothers. They are a form of humorous communication, Rek explained nervously. The humans create them and share them through their networks. They appear to be spreading to our younger citizens. The Emperor stared at the images. He did not understand why they were funny. He did not understand humor at all. His species had evolved without it. They had fear, anger, pride, and satisfaction. But laughter was foreign to them. "Why are our citizens looking at these?" he asked. "They seem to find them entertaining, my lord. There are reports of young Vorthians attempting to create their own memes. They are also showing unusual interest in human culture. Something called movies and music and television shows." Emperor Vaxillian felt something he had not experienced in centuries. It was uncertainty. The foundation of his empire was fear. Every species they had conquered had been afraid of them. That fear kept them obedient, productive, and controlled. But if fear stopped working, what was left? He summoned his military commanders and demanded answers. Why had the invasion failed? Why would the humans not surrender? What was wrong with them? The commanders had no good answers. They explained that human weapons were surprisingly advanced, far beyond anything the Empire had encountered. They talked about nuclear technology and explosive projectiles and chemical weapons. They showed data suggesting that humans had been fighting each other for their entire history, constantly developing new and more effective ways to cause destruction. "They are more violent than any species we have ever encountered," one commander said. "They have spent thousands of years perfecting the art of war. Our weapons are toys compared to theirs." This was shocking news. The Empire had always assumed that civilized species evolved past violence. Every world they had conquered had been peaceful, having learned long ago that fighting was pointless and wasteful. The idea that a species could be technologically advanced and also extremely violent was new and terrifying, but it did not explain why the humans were laughing. A junior analyst named Crix was brought before the Emperor. He was young and nervous, barely old enough to have grown his full shell. But he had been studying human psychology, and he had developed a theory. "Speak," the Emperor commanded. Crix trembled but found his voice. "My lord, I believe the humans are not afraid of us because they have faced worse. Much worse. Their history is full of disasters, wars, plagues, and catastrophes. They have survived things that would have destroyed most species. A fleet of ships in their sky is simply not impressive to them. That is ridiculous. We are the Galactic Empire. We have conquered 47 star systems." "Yes, my lord. But humans have survived ice ages, asteroid impacts, world wars, and something they call reality television. They are remarkably difficult to frighten because they have already been frightened by so many things. They have developed a psychological defense mechanism. When they are scared, they laugh." The Emperor was silent for a long moment. Then he asked a question that surprised everyone in the room. "Have we ever actually fought anyone?" The question hung in the air. Council of Rek cleared his throat. "My lord, our strategy has always been to project power so overwhelming that combat is unnecessary. Most species surrender immediately upon seeing our fleet. But have we ever actually tested our weapons against an enemy that fought back?" No one answered. The answer was no. In 3,000 years of conquest, the Empire had never fought a real war. They had shown up, looked scary, and accepted surrenders. It had worked perfectly every time until now. Emperor Vaxillion the Terrible had a terrible realization. His empire was built on nothing but appearances. They were not conquerors. They were bullies who had never met anyone willing to stand up to them. Their mighty fleet was a parade float, impressive to look at but useless in actual combat. The humans had accidentally exposed the truth. The Galactic Empire was, in the words of one human meme that Crix had shown him, all bark and no bite. What do we do now? The Emperor asked quietly. No one had an answer. Back on Earth, life continued normally. The alien ships still floated in the sky, but people had grown used to them. Some areas reported that property values near the ships had actually increased because tourists wanted to see them. Restaurants were offering alien invasion-themed menus. A popular comedian named Ryan DeLuca released a stand-up special called So Aliens Are Real and They're Adorable. It broke all streaming records. Grand Diplomat. The Tsar had stopped trying to negotiate and was instead spending her time learning about human culture. She had discovered something called cats and was sending pictures of them back to her home world. Her reports were no longer about conquest. They were about friendship and pizza and small furry animals. High Commander Xylax had stopped issuing ultimatums. He spent most of his time staring at Earth, trying to understand what he was seeing. The humans waved at his ship every morning. Some of them held up signs saying, "Welcome to Earth, and we come in peace." He was beginning to think that peace might not be such a bad idea. In the Imperial Palace, Emperor Vaxillion the Terrible looked at the stars and wondered if his entire life had been a mistake. He had ruled through fear because that was all he knew. But these humans had shown him something different. They had shown him that there were other ways to live. He did not know what to do with this knowledge. But he knew that things could not continue as they were. The Empire was about to change, whether it wanted to or not. 6 months had passed since the Galactic Empire first arrived at Earth. The warships still orbited the planet, but they were no longer a threat. They had become something closer to neighbors, strange and distant, but no longer frightening. The change had started slowly. Grand Diplomat Thesara had continued her exploration of human culture, and her reports had changed the way the Empire thought about Earth. She wrote about kindness and generosity. She wrote about how humans helped strangers without expecting anything in return. She wrote about pizza and movies and music and the strange joy that came from making friends. Her reports were read across the Empire, and they sparked something unexpected. Other Vorthians began to wonder if there was more to life than conquest and fear. Young citizens started asking questions their parents could not answer. What was humor? What was friendship? What was love? Emperor Vaxillion the Terrible watched his empire change and felt something he could not name. It might have been hope. On a cool spring morning, High Commander Xylax descended to Earth for the first time. He was nervous in a way he had never been before battle. His shuttle landed at the Geneva Conference Center, and he stepped out into the fresh air of an alien world. Ambassador Danny Ortega was waiting for him, smiling as always. Beside him stood Congresswoman Megan Price, Grand Diplomat Thesara, and a dozen other humans and aliens who had become part of the strange friendship between two civilizations. Xylax was wearing a Hawaiian shirt. It had been a gift from Danny, sent up to his ship as a gesture of goodwill. He had not understood the purpose of the colorful garment at first, but the Tsar had explained that it represented relaxation and friendship. He had worn it today to show that he came in peace. "High Commander," Danny said, extending his hand. "Welcome to Earth, for real this time." Xylax looked at the hand. He had studied human customs over the past months. He knew this was a greeting, a sign of trust. He reached out with his own clawed hand and shook it carefully, trying not to cut the soft human flesh. "Thank you," he said. The words felt strange in his mouth. He had never thanked anyone before. The meeting that followed was unlike any diplomatic session in the history of the galaxy. There were no threats, no demands, no ultimatums. Instead, there was conversation. The humans asked questions about the Empire, and Xylax answered honestly. He talked about the fear that had driven his people for thousands of years. He talked about the loneliness of conquest, the emptiness of ruling through terror, and the humans listened. They did not judge. They did not laugh. They simply listened and nodded and asked more questions. At the end of the meeting, Xylax presented a formal document. It was a petition from Emperor Vaxillion the Terrible, asking to join a new organization that the humans had proposed. They called it the Galactic Friendship Alliance. The terms were simple: free trade between worlds, cultural exchange programs, mutual defense against any outside threats, and, at the Tsar's insistence, mandatory pizza Fridays across all member planets. Danny Ortega read the document carefully. Then he smiled, picked up a pen, and signed it on behalf of Earth. "Welcome to the Alliance," he said. "We are happy to have you." The news spread across the galaxy within hours. The Galactic Empire, the most feared organization in known space, had joined a friendship alliance with a species they had tried to conquer. Other civilizations watched in amazement. Some of them began sending their own messages to Earth, asking if they could join too. Within a year, the Galactic Friendship Alliance had grown to include 37 member planets. Each one brought something unique to the organization. The Vorthians brought their advanced starship technology. The Venathi brought their diplomatic skills. A species of small furry creatures called the Plix brought what could only be described as professional hugging. Services and the humans brought something that no other species had ever offered to the galaxy before. They brought hope. Grand Diplomat Desara became Earth's most famous alien resident. She started a podcast called Humans Explained, where she tried to understand human concepts like sarcasm, puns, and why people voluntarily watch scary movies. Each episode was downloaded billions of times across the galaxy. Species that had never laughed before were now trying to tell jokes. High Commander Xylax retired from military service and became an ambassador. He spent his days traveling between worlds, helping to build bridges between species that had once been enemies. He wore Hawaiian shirts wherever he went, and he had developed a deep appreciation for human coffee. Emperor Vaxillion the Terrible quietly changed his title. He was now Emperor Vaxillion the Moderately Pleasant. His advisors had told him that this was not very intimidating, but he no longer cared about intimidation. He spent most of his time watching human television shows and wondering why no one in the galaxy had invented comedy before. The galaxy was changing. Species that had lived in fear for centuries were learning to trust each other. Trade routes opened between worlds that had never communicated. Art and music flowed across the stars, mixing and combining in ways no one had imagined. And at the center of it all was Earth, a small blue planet that had changed everything by simply refusing to be afraid. Lieutenant Commander Katie Brooks, who had first on that strange day when the aliens arrived, gave a speech at the one-year anniversary celebration of the Alliance. She stood before a crowd of humans, Vorthians, Venathi, and a dozen other species, all gathered together in peace. "We have survived world wars, pandemics, and the internet," she said, her voice steady and warm. "A bunch of oversized bugs with glow sticks was never going to stress us out." The Vorthian delegation did not entirely understand the joke, but they had learned something important over the past year. They had learned that laughter was not mockery. It was connection. It was joy shared between friends. So they laughed along with everyone else. As the celebration continued into the night, High Commander Xylax stood at the edge of the crowd, watching the strange and wonderful scene before him. Humans and aliens were dancing together, eating together, talking together. A young Vorthian was teaching a group of human children how to click their mandibles in greeting. A human musician was playing songs that blended Earth melodies with alien harmonies. Danny Ortega appeared beside him, holding 2 cups of coffee. "What do you think?" Danny asked, offering 1 cup to the former conqueror. Xylax took the cup and looked out at the celebration. "I think we were wrong about everything," he said. "We thought fear was power. But this is power, connection, friendship, joy." Danny nodded. "Humanity did not conquer the galaxy," he said. "We just made it a little more fun." Xylax clicked his mandibles in what he had been told was the Vorthian equivalent of a smile. "That is the most dangerous thing you could have done." Danny laughed and raised his cup. "To dangerous friendships." "To dangerous friendships," Xylax agreed. And somewhere in the crowd, Grand Diplomat Desaro was teaching a group of aliens about the most important human invention of all. It was not their weapons or their technology or their fearlessness. It was something much simpler. It was pizza. The galaxy would never be the same. And that was exactly how everyone wanted it.